Hello, and welcome to the True Crime Lounge. My name is Breezy, and here we talk murder and other forms of crime. Today we continue on with part 4 of our series, Dr. Death. And yes, I know. Let me hold on one second, guys. Okay, sorry about that. Anyway, this is the YouTube to my podcast, which you can find on Twitter, and Spotify, and YouTube. Um, I also have a Patreon that you can go and support as well. You don't have to, but you can if you want. Um, I also have a merch shop that you're more than welcome to go check out, and also go check out all my other videos. Like this button and subscribe. Ring for more videos like this. Come on, guys. You know you want to. A few things to close. I do have a speech impediment, and this is a series, so please go back and watch the beginning so you don't feel like you're lost. Also, now let's dive into today's episode, shall we, with part 3 of Dr. Death. So, we left off with Kathleen Grundy's daughter going on. My foot's doing an investigation into her mom's death. So, to get solid proof that of Kathleen Grundy's murder, a post-mortem was required, in which, in turn, was the examination order from a coroner. This is a rare occurrence, especially for the British police force, one of the Greater Manchester Police had not experienced. So, by the time the trial had begun, his team would be uncomfortably familiar with the process. Of the 15 killed, 9 were buried and 6 were cremated. Kathleen Grundy's was the first grave opened, and her body was the first of the ongoing post-mortem. Her tissue and hair samples were sent to different labs for analysis, waiting for the results. And at the same time, the police raided the doctor's home. It was a low-key exercise, but so Shipman had no chance of learning that the bodies have been exhumed for post-mortem. So police had to be certain that no evidence could be destroyed or concealed before their search, when the police arrived. Shipman registered no surprise. Rather, his approach was rather arrogant and contempt of the search warrant to read out. You would think if you were guilty of murder, you would be a little bit more forthcoming. You would assume. But one crucial piece to the investigation was a typewriter used to type the bogus will. And Shipman produced an old brother manual portable, telling an improbable tale of how Mrs. Grundy sometimes borrowed it. It is believed, this is not a believable story, as you can imagine. So, when forensic scientists confirmed it was a machine used to type the counterfeit and other fraudulent documents. So, searching the house yielded medical records. Some mysterious degree of surprise to Shipman home was littered with filthy clothes, old newspapers from a doctor's home. It was nothing short of unsanitary, but an even bigger surprise was due. Let's bring into the morphine factor, shall we? So toxicologist Julie Evans filed a report on the cause of Mrs. Grundy's death. And the detective was astounded. The morphine level in the dead woman's body was the cause of death. Not only that her death would have occurred within 3 hours, having received a fatal overdose, it is later said that Shipman's use of drug was a serious miscalculation. A doctor surely should have known that morphine is one of the few poisons that can remain in the body tissue for centuries. As a doctor, you would think he would know that, right? Well, he would claim that later that day in a stylish that later that the stylish and conservative old lady was a junkie. Even today, psychologists speculate the possibility that he wanted to be caught. That's the thing. I really do think in the end he wanted to be caught. Like, I think he knew it was getting tiring and stuff, and he just really wanted to be caught. But I can't really be sure. I can't speak for the dead, but just looking at it. So, just which steps to investigate became the priority. And to decide. Okay, guys, sorry, I have been up since 7 this morning. No caffeine whatsoever. Had an interview I had to go to, and I have to work tonight at another job. So, anyway, as you can imagine, let's go. To decide what was divided based on the pattern, to those who had not been cremated had following a shipment house call took precedence. Other issues were factored in, but obviously uncremated bodies could yield tissue samples for examination. Slightly different criteria were applied to the next group of police investigation. All cremated, and they were investigated mainly on the basis of known pre-selecting conditions regarding the death and Shipman's presence before they died. Whenever the doctor had urged families to cremate their bodies and had also stressed no further investigation was necessary, it may seem strange that no relatives found this peculiar. I mean, I personally would have, especially if I would have known that the person was healthy. But however, when you trust a doctor, especially you trust these doctors, right? And after all the causes of death, he was presented with irrational, even bereaved families who were often surprised to learn the conditions of the loved one. Even though they questioned the doctor, he had computerized medical notes to prove patients he has seen various symptoms he cited them leading to the cause of death. Police later altered the computer to make them everything match. So, Shipman may most have changes within hours after the patient's death, others often immediately after the killing. In the case of 82-year-old Catherine Grundy, this was reinforced the later statement that she was a morphine junkie, inventing and backdating several injuries. And it is suggesting that highly respectable women have been scoring hits from drug dealers overwhelmingly. Seriously. So what would ultimately help with him, is going to be the cyber trail. Well, Shipman first encountered a computer, and he was technophobic, but he reluctantly agreed to embrace the new technology. He declared himself a computer expert, and this was consistent with his need to assert his superiority. But what the self-proclaimed computer whiz didn't know was that his hard drive record to the second, even phony alterations have been made to the patient's record. A taped interview with the Greater Manchester Police demonstrates the lack of knowledge. So, and I'm not going to go over the whole conversation with you guys, but he basically, it was just like his basic password and all of that, and it's like this guy was a beginner at best with technology, and probably at that time, though, that with new technologies, there's always a beginning, but now we have like prototypes for everything. But he was new, so he was very sloppy in this, I believe. And it was apparent from from this exchange that he was willing to cooperate with the police. So what about the preliminaries? Well, the first week was spent in with the usual courtroom, and his defense counsel, Nicola Davies, went first. Primarily a medical lawyer, 46-year-old Miss Davies mainly dealt with matters outside criminal court. And she had 3 applications to present. The first one was the trial halted, claimed that he could not receive a fair trial because of his prior and inaccurate, misleading coverage for the case. In the second application, she wanted the court to hold these separate trials, and she would claim that Miss Grundy should be separate, is alone had alleged any motive and greed. In the second trial, she would go on to say that involved only patients who have been buried because they were the only group with physical evidence and cause of death. In the third trial, she believed that they should cover only those cremated as no physical evidence of death existed. So again, the prosecutor countered with the argument that because the cases were interrelated, trying all of them to present would require for a comprehensive picture. She presented the prosecution's third application, one that stunned the court, and she wanted evidence that referred to Volume 8 disallowed. Eventually, this detailed how it accumulated morphine for 28 patients, many now deceased, and it showed that he continued prescribing the same day after they died. Yeah. So the trial. The trial would begin in earnest for the counsel for the prosecution, Richard Henriques, delivered his opening statement. One of the top baristas in Britain, and who had handled many sensitive and difficult trials, holding the sensational Jamie Belger trial, when the two 10-year-old boys were kidnapped, tormented, and then murdered 2-year-old Jamie. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and specify that I live in America, so I have no clue how the British legal system works. That's the thing. So, but the American legal system, I can give a general knowledge of, basically. But anyway, back to the rabbit hole. Addressing the case at hand, Mr. Henriques stated that none of those buried, nor indeed cremated, were prescribed morphine or diamorphine, and all of them died most unexpectedly, all seen by Dr. Shipman that same day. He will continue to outline his case and dismiss the amnesia and the mercy killings on the basis that the dead were of terminal illness. He will go on to claim that Shipman killed 15 patients because he enjoyed doing so. I think so too, honestly, if I'm being honest. But, yeah. His first witness was Angela Woodruff, an accomplished solicitor. She was striking as her mother and had been held in life. So, you can tell, it's believed that from the verge of breaking down, she was in that witness box trying to keep it all together. I can't imagine being put on the trial like that, standing as a witness for something like that, especially something horrific like that. She will go on to explain the police photographs of her home with her mom, where she lived so happily. She then told of the harrowing phone call from the high police that informed her of her death. So, seeking clarification, she would later have a conversation with Dr. Shipman. And she couldn't remember why the doctor claimed to have been there. Speaking of this clumsy attempt made to fake that all were leaving the shipment, and she told her mother meticulously the attention to detail should have everything neatly with her mom in a way. This was apparent to anyone reading her mom's diary, where every detail was important and recorded in perfect penmanship. So she would go on to show how healthy her mom was. And this portrait of an elderly but extremely fit woman was frequently as others victims' family took the witness box. He definitely had a type, for sure. Honestly, what do y'all think? Do y'all think he wanted to get away with it, or what? Mrs. Woodruff occurred, it was common knowledge that she and her husband David had inherited £1 million from her father-in-law, and had confirmed the couples earned a sizable income. So, this was an attempt on Miss Davis to show Miss Woodruff's relationship with her mother had been unharmonious, and totally dispelled, and the witness and the host of the witnesses were examined. Several days later, Dr. John Rutherford, a leading government pathologist, appeared, and he was tactful and dignified as he led the court to the gruesome details that was carried out. So, in great detail, he explained the procedure, focusing on the importance of collecting body tissue from the analysis. And the tests were consistent in the case that Dr. Rutherford had his victims had not died from natural causes. Typically, morphine toxicity was the cause of death. And to analyze had been found the fingerprints who had worked on the Waco cult disaster was called. The defense fingerprints claimed that his methodology was inconclusive, but there were no prints matching Catherine Grundy's, and it was obvious that she had never handled a will. But yeah. Like, he got sloppy. That is the thing right there. Like, eventually you're gonna get caught. You just gotta remember that. But yeah, what do y'all think? Like, do you think he started off neat and had a pretty little bow tie wrapped around it, or what? I am curious. Let me know, really. But yeah. So during week 2 of the trial, Shipman's former staff and colleagues were called to bear witness. A nurse who took an oath and immediately burst into tears. Regaining her composure, she told how Shipman had reacted when he realized that he would be arrested at that moment. And the doctor had broken down and said, "I read thrillers, and the evidence that they have against me would have me guilty." But the nurse, she really took it as like a dark humor almost. I mean, we all have dark humor, right? So another patient, whose statement was read out in court, described his feelings on the will when he told her. So the last part of the was that Grundy heard the case evidence from the GP. In after medical notes, he spoke on how he would have quite behavior, whereas Dr. Shipman had quickly pronounced Kathleen Grundy dead. Grenville claimed that he would have attempted to revive the patient, which was standard medical practice, of course. So, by now, onlookers were forming a picture of a very callous and inefficient defendant. This impression would not only intensify as the grueling weeks ahead. So, by now, the trial had gained momentum, and that characteristics were evidence followed a set pattern. And although Kathleen Grundy's case had been taken over a week, those to follow would be progressed more quickly. And when the speeded up trial with emerging characteristics among the ambulance telephone scam, it was discovered a patient dead, and he would pick up and pretend to cancel the ambulance. One example was used to 77 Lizzie Adams, she loved dancing, and she played Ginger to his Fred, as she would describe it, with her partner William, as it was described by her partner William Catlow. When he arrived, he found Shipman examining the impressive collection of porcelains and crystal in the next room as Lizzie lay dying. Yeah, seriously though, like, are you trying to be clumsy? Like, I don't get this guy. But telephone records prove that Shipman never phoned the ambulance service that day. In the case of Nora Total, her son Anthony had told the police, told how they made the mother left alone for 20 minutes and he returned to find Shipman leaving the house. And shortly after, Shipman was merely touched the neck and said, "I'm sorry, she has gone." So these telephone calls that thoughts may continue. Like, it just makes no sense right there. But anyway, that is it for today's episode. Join us next week as we talk about part 5, as we continue with part 4, and that will be our finale part. Y'all have a great day and have a happy fall. Try to stay warm out there too, 'cause it's pretty cold out there. Alright, y'all have a great day.